The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below. Hey there, this is your orchestration tutor Thomas Goss, welcoming you to the 6th compilation of entries from website subscribers of orchestrationonline.com to the 2022 Orchestration Challenge, Orchestrating the Prelude in G Major by Barvinsky. This first entry really knocked me out. I really loved it, and it's such a pity, Dora, that your mock-up doesn't adequately express the ideas that you have in your score. And I think that could be easily remedied if you had a version of Note Performer. I don't know if that works with your application. This looks like Dora to me. So I think that I'm pretty sure, or I know for a fact, that there's a version of Note Performer for Dora, and it's fairly low cost. It's I don't know. I think it might be like €100 or €80 or something like that. I'm not sure what that translates euro to dollars to New Zealand dollars, but it's not incredibly expensive. Somebody I'm sure will correct me out there what the current price is, but compared to some sound sets that cost anywhere from $500 to $2,000, it's really a cheap option, and it would make your it would just make your mock-up a lot more realistic. For instance, we were listening to that harp just now, and it really sounds like guitar, doesn't it? Right, rather than harp. Which actually, I have to say that guitar would sound fantastic here if it were loud enough, right? So it just really is not quite loud enough. Harp is, of course, the orchestral option. But when combined with this beautiful, lonely clarinet up here, it almost sounds like people around a campfire, with somebody playing harmonica and somebody playing guitar. Wonderfully evocative. So it's a shame people are not hearing certain things. And I know one thing for sure, and that is Note Performer interprets fingered tremolo like this much better. Now, in this fingered tremolo, you would need a slur over each pair of notes. Or if you intended them all to be under one bow, just have the slur last as long as the bow. Usually, in a situation like this, you would have the slurring following the groups of tremolos, right? In a case like this, if you were just going to have this all under one bow, you would have just one single slur combining them all. But generally speaking, most of the time you'll see a slur over each pair of notes rather than this. Like what this literally means here is for the player to play each one of these pitches separately, like with a bow going back and forth furiously, right? Which is really not exactly, it's obviously not what you want here. Okay, all right, so let's talk about the scoring here. You have got first flute playing a solo at the beginning, and then here you're saying English horn solo. So who's playing the solo, and who has prominence here? Who has, who is the more important part? Because you're combining flute and English horn, which you can do. I mean, it's not an impossibility. If you want a blended tone, I would actually score the English horn at piano. Because the lower it gets, the more it is going to dominate the sound of the flute. And if you have a situation like this where the solo players are really listening to each other, then you could sort of get a blend. But the lower that the flute goes, the more the English horn is going to speak out, even despite itself, right? You're sending your flute all the way down to E, and against the B here in the English horn, the first flute has really no recourse than to just make sure that the English horn player plays very softly, like down to pianissimo practically, in order to get a blend here. So you would really need to balance this. And then of course you've got pianissimo horns, and the horns are also going to eat up the quality of tone that the first flute has, right? So I mean, realistically speaking, what you have here is a combination of English horn solo plus horns, plus French horns, with a little bit of flute thickening to the English horn, right? And I mean, if all you're going to do is just thicken the English horn part, it might be easier to do that with a clarinet playing down one degree, right? So you could actually score this like this: pianissimo horns, piano espressivo, English horn. You don't need to bring it up all the way up to mezzo piano. Piano espressivo, add some nuances. Maybe push into the phrase, pull out, and so on. And then clarinet. If you really want that soft thickening of the English horn, don't bother with the flute. Add clarinet at pianissimo as well, right? So just kind of right behind the English horn. Okay. So I think that would be in character, and it would also work really well with the first clarinet coming in here solo, which is a wonderful idea, right? And I really love this background that you've got here. There's no need for you to have, I mean, why? All right. So look, you don't have to have your pizzicato here piano and your tremolo strings pianissimo. They could all be pianissimo, right? You don't need to do that kind of dynamic mixing as if each instrument were on a dial, or each section were, a little bit less, and one here and one there and so on. Just, try to be a little bit more uniform. Try to score to the dynamic rather than adjust the dynamic to the score, okay? Yeah, and then see here, you're all pushing together towards mezzo piano and so on. I think you should put the mezzo piano mark here, right? Don't worry about it seeming to come early compared to everybody else. It's perfect. It will sound perfectly fine. And the harp. So just be aware. I just want to make absolutely sure that you are aware that harpists like to read the pitch played, right? Not the pitch sounding in their harmonics. So if you intend this sound, the actual sound of A above middle C, then you should score the pitch an octave lower with a harmonic mark over it. Then you will get the sound of the A above middle C. Now, if you give a harpist a score like this and you don't explain, I want it on the pitch played, not the pitch sounding, I want harmonics on the pitch played, then if you don't tell them that, then they will actually just play this and it'll sound an octave higher, right? So I think actually that would be a really cool idea, because then you get the variation between pitch played, pitch an octave higher. Okay, and all of this is really nice. I love this unfolding quality of the harp right in here, and I like that you keep the horns in the background. That's great. And I also, I have to say that you are ticking a lot of the boxes of my evaluation criteria. Does the treatment of the melody represent an emotional and timbral progression? That is one of my criteria, right? Which you can see back there in the intro. And yes, it does. I mean, you really are, you're starting off with this very soft beginning, and then you're continuing on into this kind of lonely campfire type of a sound here, like sort of sounding like guitar and harmonica. And then you are ending with more force here. I don't know if you need to go all the way up to forte here, but I mean, it does sound effective, but yeah. And then I think I would leave it the way that it is, but add a little diminuendo here, so that the flute joins the rest of the instruments without such a big drop off, right? Without just being really loud, da 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 da. It's suddenly soft, right? So it's more like the parts come together dynamically better. Yeah, I mean, I like it a lot. I think it's really, really cool. It's just a nice strong entrance. And I also like the fact that you're pairing first and second horn together on these subtle little intervals. Here, if you want the first horn to last for the value of the entire bar, the dotted whole note, then tied to this half note, then have that as the first voice, and then have this part under here as second voice, right? So here you're adding second voice below and second voice below, right? So this is the same thing here. The second horn should be in second voice, and then end here in second voice, just to make it really clear, right? And I think you might possibly intend this to be slurred all the way through. Yeah, so yeah, I'm not going to come after you about the slurs in this. I've talked about it in other evaluations. Just go ahead and watch them. I don't want to use up too much of your time. Okay. Now, going on into here, really, like listening to this, I just really felt the need for you to use Note Performer. I think it would be a big step up for what you are accomplishing, especially like in realistic expectations about the sound of the harp, its balance with the rest of the orchestra, these measured fingered tremolos in here, and all that. Like I think that you just get a way more realistic sound. Yeah, it's intriguing, like the trombone and tuba working together, and I don't know, I'm going to jump up here again. Yeah, two trombones, tuba. You really only are using a single trombone here. Yeah, F, D here. So I'm looking at this, and I'm kind of wondering if there was any possible way that you could economize on brass players, so that so that it could be done all with just tuba and four horns. But I'm just really, I'm seeing that in here, the way that you've scored it, there just really is no substitution for how it's done. So leaving it the way it is fine. Yeah. So make sure that you correct things like this when you send me a score. So, like for instance, here you had bass clef, and then you transpose the score, but you didn't put the horns, these lower horns, back into treble clef, right? So, because there's just no way that the third hornist would ever want to read these high ledger lines. In fact, that is one of the big complaints of third horn players in particular, is that the is that the composers will score things, or orchestrators will score things on a grand staff, and then the third horn part ends up being in ledger lines above bass clef, and then they get a part like that, and they just get really mad, okay, because they get things like that too much. So please correct back to a treble clef when you send me a score, unless the parts really are low. Now, as far as the character and the scoring of all of this, I actually approve. Here you've got octaves in your third and fourth horns, and you've got these intervals working together in first and second. That's perfectly fine to have like two different tasks for your two different pairs of horns. They don't always have to be stacked in order of, slavishly in order of pitch, no matter what, and trading off with each other. It's better to pair them in order of function, or in terms of conjoined function. So this is perfectly fine. And working with these low trombones, it gets pretty darn low there. It's going to be a little growly there, rather than smooth. So just so long as you're aware of that, and also giving them three tenutos in a row, ta 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 ta, right? What if this were portato, ta ha ha ta, right? So like, in other words, a slur over the tenuto mark, so it was really all kind of from the stomach, right? Rather than ta ta ta, really kind of seamless tenuto notes following each other. We would have like more of that suggestion of an impulse, of the pulse coming from the stomach. Now here, it's strange. You have like these two different approaches in these 8 bars. Like here at the end, you have very sensible up and down bows. Up, down, and then this would be 2 up bows. Up, down, up, and so on. But here you have like this hugely long down bow, and then up, and then a hugely long down bow. So you know what I think? I think you could make this smaller. Down, up, down, right? Up, down, right? It's just so much more sensible than just this massively long bow here. Now, as to the dynamic balance here, here you brought out your melody mezzo piano, and then you've got everybody else, and then you've got mezzo forte winds in here, and then you have piano little measured tremolo, and then you've got pianissimo horns, and so you just have a different, you seem to have a different dynamic marking, here and there, and it's just so many different dynamic markings. Okay, so you need a philosophy. Like once again, score the dynamics to the orchestra, right? Rather than the orchestra to the dynamics. So, try to come up with solutions that can be dynamically cohesive, like with the sections more or less playing at the same dynamic all the way through, and then you just in rare situations adjust the level of the dynamics up and down. So for instance, like maybe brass could be a dynamic a little quieter, right? Which I think is perfectly great right in here. But there's no need for your first flute and your second clarinet, or excuse me, your first clarinet here to be mezzo forte against the mezzo piano of the violins. Once again, you have a dynamic where one group of instruments is going to blot out the other group, right? So the winds here are just going to be very powerful and push away the strings. So what if all of the instruments were soft, were piano, including your melody instruments, and you brought up the harp, I would say, to mezzo piano or even mezzo forte, and leave the brass at pianissimo? I think that would work just as well, because you have I think you're worried about second flute sort of stepping on the toes of your first clarinet, but it's actually really not going to get in the way that much. In fact, the second flute here is going to be more or less invisible right? And just the way that you've scored it. But I'm not going to get on your case too much about second flute being in a place where it would disappear. It's not a huge crisis. It's just that the horns are going to absorb most of the sound of that second flute, and then the second violins are going to take what's left, right? If you really want a patterned, some sort of pattern in here that would work perfectly fine, like third clarinet, right? If you had a third clarinet, or maybe, I don't know, English horn is a little out of character for this, but I would say leave it alone. It's fine. It just really is contributing very little to the overall sound picture in terms of weight, right? When you get to here in your mock-up, you can really hear the clarinets very loudly. But flutes, a little in the background, more where you want them. All right, but let's not overdo it. Now here you have just a ton of tenuto staccato. So do you know what tenuto staccato sounds like? The articulation is unga, right? Unga, 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 unga. It is not doink, and it's not doot. It is unga, because you've got the ng of the staccato, and you have the of the tenuto, right? So it's kind of like touching a sticky surface, right, and pulling your fingertip away, unga. And that's sort of like what this ends up sort of sounding like, tiptoeing, right? So that makes perfect sense working together with the pizzicato, right? It gives it a very tiptoeing kind of a sound. So I think that the risk that you're running here is that your first player is going to assume that you want to continue with that. So, there's kind of nothing that you can do here except, like, you could say sim, S-I-M period, so like simile, to sort of show that your first bassoonist is going to continue on in that way. Or you could just write norm or ord above, O-R-D period, N-O-R-M period, above the part to show that you were kind of going back to normal articulation. Or you just put a slur over it, right? And that would cancel it out. Okay. But I think it's a gorgeous... overall, it is a gorgeous approach. It's just a wonderful, very romantic, and it really does lend itself to this kind of push here, where you're pushing into a louder, a stronger, more forceful area here. Now see here, you've got forte clarinet, forte flute, and forte piccolo, right? And already, you're already bigger. So what you've got here is that the piccolo is going to start to eat away at the listener's ear, right? In a real situation, going up to that D, pushing towards forte and this high G. It's just going to have this ringing in the listener's ear, which might be a little unpleasant, right? Especially as you have it reinforced here by flute here, then the octave with the clarinet, and so on. So it may be doing things that you don't expect it to. You want to give it the sheen above, right? So once again, just bring everybody's level down to piano, right? Except for harp a little bit more and keep the brass in the background. Then here you're pushing towards mezzo piano. So what does that suggest? It sort of suggests that you're going to go from piano to mezzo forte. So just have everybody go to mezzo forte, right? Try this. Dora, if you can afford to get Note Performer, make the changes I suggest, even out the dynamic markings and so on, and see if that sounds better. Okay, I have a feeling that it will. So yeah, very cool score, and a wonderful way to start off this this round of evaluations. Very excited about this. I'm actually working on this other project right now, just right alongside. I feel like I'm like running down a tightrope, not carefully walking across it, but just like running for my life right now, doing all these evaluations part of the day and doing that other project right on top of it. And then when I finish that, I have to do yet another project right alongside, and so on. It's going to be like a race to the finish. but I'm very happy to do it, and it's really, really exciting. So with that in mind, thank you, Dora. And now let's look at our second contribution to this compilation. Wow, now that was a really wild entry, George. You probably noticed that I reorganized your score to fit the format. So just to clue you in, you got the dimensions wrong. You had it 420 wide by 747 high, right? So this is the correct orientation, 747 wide, right? So just by 420 high. That's close to screen dimensions, and it's good enough for me to edit and make work on a screen for everybody to watch out there. So just for future reference. Okay, so look, there's a lot of issues here. Okay, one of which, like, I really loved the use of the tubular bells, and however, like, I wasn't too keen on this passing tone here. Da-dum, right on the dong. Like it really is kind of interfering with the clarity of the bell, right? Of that bell ringing, right? So it sort of interrupts the listener's focus on on the sound of the bell. I mean, that's sort of like it's almost like it works at cross purposes to have passing tones like right under a bell strike, right? Because unless you're sort of calling attention to it and bringing out that weird thing, it just kind of doesn't quite settle, right? Another thing that we could sort of talk about a little bit before launching into just this problem or that problem, with or how I can coach you with this or that, is like the scoring of the harp. So, as most people could probably hear, like the what really did come through in the harp part were these chords, right? So you could hear these chords at the beginning, right? And then a little tiny bit of glitter could be heard from the harp here, but like the flute part here is so active that it's just burying anything that's going on with the harp. So I would say, like, choose one or the other. I don't think you can have both, right? And in fact, here I would say choose one or the other. Like, either have this played in octaves with both hands or on a separate harp, and these rolls, or just have the rolls, or have or have like an octave melody rather than just single notes, because this is just really not going to come through. And it's also kind of it's a bit of a hassle to play, right? Like, harp is not like piano music, right? It is that if you have music that is interactive between the hands, then that is the best kind of writing, right? Because a harp is not like a piano with two hands doing separate things all the time. Although, some harpists, like Amy Turk, like, can play like toccata and fugue in D minor by Bach, right, on their harp. But like, that's really rare, right? For an orchestra part, for an orchestral reading or performance or something like that, and you're just working with a standard orchestra, you don't want to give your harpist massive amounts of stuff to do, especially if nobody's going to hear it, right? That's the thing. It's like, the harpists would just be killing themselves to learn all of this right hand stuff, and then when it all comes down to it, mostly what people can just hear are a few chords and the glissando. Just use one style of line for for your glissandos. Don't use like a wavy line here and a straight line there. This is much better, by the way. And you can just get rid of problems by like going to layout and then turning off the magnetic thing, and then in that case you can cross the staff if you need to, right? Okay, so hang on, just adjust that. It's kind of a waste of time for me to do that, but you get the idea, right? So yeah, just use this. Don't use the kinky line. So it just would be better, like if you got this riff going on top of the music, just like maybe you could put that on, put this into like say a xylophone, not a xylophone, a glockenspiel part, right? That would work a whole lot better, right? Or vibraphone, right? But I think for harp, it's just asking a lot of the player and of the balance, right? Like especially when things start getting going here and we're really pushing towards this, like the harp is going to become invisible. Like at the most you'll be able to hear this big glissando here. And this is kind of strange. Like you have this really intricate part with the right hand, and then you have the big glissando with the left hand, and then the harpist is supposed to organize this chord here. So it's not impossible, but it's tricky, and considering how it will be invisible anyway, right? Don't ask the harpist to do something that nobody can hear when it's really, really difficult. All right. Okay, so now let's talk scoring. All right, so those are just a couple of issues, right? I mean, here's another one, tam-tam, right? So you're saying, okay, so the tam-tam is going to get softer and softer, and then it's going to diminuendo to here. But actually, this belongs here, because there's no way that the tam-tam player can make the tam-tam softer after they've struck it with a mallet, right? It just naturally gets softer on its own. So it's best just to mark everything that the tam-tam player can control, right? And then so diminuendo to, I guess, triple P here, and then the sustain will do the rest of the work. And you could hear right in here, right? Even though this note would appear to be isolated, it basically just got swallowed up by the rest of the winds. A much stronger note is the lower one. Is the lower E, right? That will stand out a lot better. Okay, I could write a whole tip on how how bell percussion gets swallowed up by different especially something like this, where you really are covering a lot of the pitches that the tubular bell is as well, right? So it just gets like against an incredibly soft string pad, then the tubular bells will stand out much better, for instance, right? And then there's a few issues here. I would say, while these low notes here in the horn are perfectly playable, it's just sort of, I mean, especially if you got this contrabassoon and double bass stuff happening below, I would really want to double this, the fourth horn player right here, with say maybe a trombone player or maybe really pianissimo tuba or something. Just I would just want some kind of doubling on that just to make it a little bit more secure, because I feel like just it's very naked where you've got it, right? It's very exposed. All right. So let's just talk turkey on scoring, okay? So you've got alto flute doing a whole lot of stuff in here, all right? And huge responsibility in here. I'll have more to say about it there. But here is a place where the alto flute works great, right? And then as things start to get stronger and more involved, the alto flute is making less and less of a difference, right? It's right in here, it's getting swallowed up by the middle winds, right? So I would say this, don't don't score anything for the alto flute in an intense passage like this, a very very multi-layered passage. Don't give it anything where it is the only voice, right, on the part, where it's and it has to compete with the other instruments around it, because it just gets buried, right? Like for instance, right in here, you have the alto flute sitting on a sounding E, right? So is there anybody doubling that note anywhere? No. So the responsibility is on the alto flute. Meanwhile, you've got horn playing all through here, and the horn will have a tendency to absorb the sound of the alto flute as well, right? So just it's here you have alto flute playing sounding E, right, and then sounding A, right, and then we have those same two notes here on first horn. So just the alto flute is gone, right? So, I mean, there's some cool ideas. If the alto flute were as strong as the flute, even just the standard flute in its softer register, there would be more of a chance for it to be useful. But I just don't feel like with the thickness of the scoring that you've got here, I don't think that it's really feasible. And then here, like you're giving huge amounts of responsibility to it, and you're also stacking the horn and the first violin and the alto flute all together. They're sort of working together, right? With the alto flute doubling the violin, so it is making almost no contribution whatsoever in terms of tone weight or quality or blending with the blending with the violin in a way that is that changes or merges or blends in a kind of a shaping of the tone or anything like that. It's kind of inconsequential, whatever the mock-up may say. It doesn't have that, it's not necessarily being used in a very strong way, right? And they getting higher and higher up to that sort of the crystalline, kind of grainy, interesting place. It really just gets completely swamped in everything else that's going on, right? So, I mean, in principle, it's something that should work if it were like a clarinet, right? If this were a clarinet line doubling the, but your clarinets are tied up doing other things, right? So, maybe if you had like your third clarinet player playing this on, or let's say this was a first clarinet line and this other stuff was like all played by second and third clarinet. Now of course we have got some inconsistencies here, right? Is this two clarinets? Is this the first clarinet? So like the second clarinet comes in here, right? It's not totally clear on what parts are doubling, what parts are just solo, or it's not solo, but a single instrument. So yeah, just watch out for stuff like that. All right, so I kind of got sidetracked again. So this, like the first two bars work great, except for this passing tone, I feel. So I think that's a really nice color. I think the alto flute justifies its existence here. But not that it couldn't be played by a standard flute, right? So if the rest of the alto flute part isn't really working, then you don't even need the alto flute at all. You just need a third flute, right? Just need and if you have a third flute, right? Maybe this is more of a first flute line, like this. Some of this other stuff, like right in here, would be more of a first flute line, and this could be second and third flute, right? And you'd have more leadership from your first flute player. It really is much more of a flute thing or a clarinet thing than it is really, in terms of functionality and usefulness. So yeah, continuing on to here, like, it's a cool sound, like right in here, like, I think you're intentionally trying to be harmonically ambiguous, right? So like, you really change the focus of the flow of the music right in here. But try not to do things like this. Like don't split up a 6/4 time into half note followed by a dotted half note followed by a quarter note. Okay, it's just to go back to my Berkeley days, that is hella confusing. All right, so this should be a half note tied to a quarter note, right? or excuse me, half note slurring to a quarter note, and then the quarter note is tied to a half note. Right? So you're just really setting things up to be very confusing for the conductor and for the player, right? They need to know where the half bar is, right? That is really, really important, and especially for, in terms of the leadership. So there might have been something that like you you did and like you didn't even realize you were doing it when you did it. So you've got a lot of motion in here, like the kind of the flowing bassoon and so on and so forth. So, you've got that going on. You've got the alteration of the harmonic emphasis. You've got slurs over repeated notes, and if you've been following this series of evaluations, then you'll know that I want you to justify that, right? Because otherwise it's just dropping the piano style phrasing onto your winds and strings without it really meaning anything, right? Your strings are going to need to bow. They're going to need to bow occasionally, changing the direction of the bow and so on and so forth, like with more frequency than you're giving them here, for it to be more meaningful, to be able to add more stress and nuance to your dynamic fluctuations. And then right in here, you've got a slur mark that is covering two players, right? So what does that say to where does it end for the first player and where does it start for the second player, right? So these have to be two separate slurs. There has to be a slur over the top and a slur under the bottom, right? Okay, so just like there are little things like that. This could have had a bit more proofreading. In a situation like this, I think it's a little like the role of the horn is a little inconsistent here. Like first, it's doubling our clarinet family parts, and then it kind of changes to a bassoon right in here with just the second. So the loss of intensity of tone is going to be like a shelf, right? It's going to sort of be just like dropping off. There's no diminuendo here to sort of ease into this part with the second. This really should be more of a first part, right? Let the first part lead the horns, all right? Then right in here you change to sort of more of a pad, but with the horn working together with the violas, but then you don't have the pickup note in the horns, right? So it's like there's a sense of disconnection there. So there's just a lot of little things, like little adjustments that you could make in here to make it flow a lot better. But I mean, having said there, like the colors are really beautiful. I'm picking it apart. And you're probably thinking, "Oh my God, my beautiful piece! He hates everything about it." No, I think you have some really beautiful colors in here. But just like make sure that the continuity and the proportions work well, right? Try not to leave a fourth horn hanging when it's in the middle of a sort of a stacked you've got this stack of A's. They're 2 octaves apart, right? And then you got the fourth horn in the middle. That is not enough support, right? So you could take care of the problem by having your cellos in octaves here, right? And that covering the fourth horn part, or like I said before, you bring in tuba or trombone or or some other instrument to just sort of gently work with that part. But yeah, it just feels really, there's going to be some possible problems there, even a possible intonation problem, right? So it's good for the fourth player to be playing alongside somebody when they start digging in the basement like that. Not all the time. I mean, if this were completely isolated, like if this were the accompaniment to say like a solo flute thing, then it would be completely fine. But there just needs to be more integration of that fourth horn part into the texture. All right, so I don't want to talk about it too much. I'm just really spending all my time on little bits and pieces and of overall guidance and looking at the first page. All right, so moving on, right? Like I was saying before, some of the harp is justifiable, but the alto flute really is at a loss here. This is really a first flute part, right? And this could be second and third flute. And for that matter, this could be also handled by second flute, and then these other pitches in here could be just left out, or could be given to a third flute player, and so on. So I think that like you don't need alto flute, right? If the entire purpose was to try this experiment, then the experiment is probably not going to make that much of a difference. So yeah, but here we're getting back into questions of bowing. Do you really want down bow, up down bow, up down? Do you see the problem? So like, you really just divide it into, like, if you when in doubt, divide to the half bar, right? So just much easier to go, like, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Right? I know some of the notes I was singing on the previous page weren't correct, but I was just thinking of the overall melody in my head. It's okay for wind phrases to be longer, right? But like, once again, just like slurring across the downbeat. I mean, try not to do that unless you really want to push in with the breath, right? And I don't really sense that people are really thinking about that. I think that I'm just really seeing slurring that is imported from the piano part, right? So, all right. But I like a lot of these flowing lines. Like right in here, you don't have to have this, like, just because it appeared to be disconnected in the piano part. These parts were connecting with the middle staff, right? So like here, you work it in, right? Or actually, yeah, I see what's going on. Yeah, right. Okay, so look, this does not have to be disconnected, right? The middle voice part should connect with these phrases, so it's like all flowing, and you're not disconnecting the flow constantly. You're not disconnecting the phrase, right? So like, this is way better. This is, you just really feel that da 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 da. Whereas like, you could just go ba da da da, just like this da. I mean, I just have things flow more. Don't just find the pitch. Like, this is something that I actually had in my pitfall, so you might not have read it. You might not have seen the video, George, but like, that was what I was talking about when I was talking about the importance of the middle voice, right? Connecting the notes so that you don't get this sort of disjunct kind of a feeling from your accompanying instruments. Okay, and I mean, this is all kind of fun. These could have been portados, they could have had that sort of kind of coming from the gut kind of articulation. Yeah, and then here it kind of turns into this kind of circusy waltz. And like, at this point, you've got these, anytime you've got something like this, trombone coming in, you could just forget about the harp making any difference, including, and the alto flute and so on. So like, I feel like you used some instruments that have more of a delicate kind of a sound. I mean, even to an extent, like the tubular bells, like, like, you might not think of as the most delicate instrument, especially after hearing like Boris Godunov, right? By Mussorgsky, but like, it is a more delicate sound, and it is difficult to compete with other instruments. A lot of times, like, the player will hit a note on the tubular bell, and it just like, you won't hear it, because the secret is that we are inventing the sound of the bell in our minds. Like, our minds supply the pitches that are supposed to be there. If you take a graphic, like a graphic EQ, right, or a graphic mixer, and you play different parts of the bell, right? Like, you'll find out that the fundamental just doesn't exist there. It's just something that our brain puts together because of what we hear. Well, the problem with that is that the orchestra can take certain parts that convince our mind that we're hearing the bell tone, and it can erase them, and then you don't hear the bell at all, right? It's just like a clank. So I should really do some more research into that phenomenon. All right, so right in here, like, this is not really a horn line. I mean, it could easily be played by the horn, but you're going to find it's a lot less graceful than you think. All right. Yeah, but I mean, if you were going to do this, I would really like have the low horns play this. I'd have your second and fourth, right? So just to jump up. All right, so this is one solo. So I would mark this 2 period, 4 period, right? Just to make sure that we had those two, right? Okay, and then you have this big swoop going up. I mean, it's sort of like Heldenleben, like, which is like, starts at the bottom of the horns range, goes all the way to the top, and then comes back down. And man, it takes like one of the greatest horn players in the world to play it perfectly, right? Even, it's like one of those challenges, though, that the horn players like to throw them into, but like you're not, I would say, you're not Richard Strauss yet, right? So just watch out for, this kind of cello-like writing. I mean, it's playable, but it's not as pretty or not as flowing as other instruments that honestly are doing it better, like already. Bassoons and bass clarinet and so on and so forth. So I think there are better uses you could put the horn to in there, like, or you could have the horn take over like somewhat like more of the middle kind of writing. I think would be better, and then you don't need to use bass clef. That might be a better way of doing it, but I just don't like writing this kind of cello like stuff for them is not necessarily going to be the most successful scoring. Now, a lot of times, like I'll recommend against something or recommend thinking about something and so on, and it's not that I'm saying that it doesn't work. I might be more implying that it isn't beautiful, right? That it's like, or it doesn't have the sort of natural feeling that is implied by the rest of the score, that kind of thing, right? It's not a judgment on what the horn can or can't do or other things like that. It really is more to do with like what what is going to sound a certain way, like it's really obvious what the orchestrator is sort of aiming for, like in this case, like that kind of more flowing line. But I mean, look, if you really want to make it kind of circusy and fun and silly, then I think that works fine on horn. And I mean, and by silly, I just mean sort of madcap. I don't mean that your effort is less than serious. But yeah, throw in the glissando trombones in there. So like here you are glissandoing up like a tenth, right? So that will have to be divided between different positions of the slide, and you may want to sort of cut it down in a situation like this. Really, just cut it down to what is possible. And in you can find online like charts of trombone slide positions to see like what is possible in just a natural, just like using the slide of the trombone. And I actually have one in 100 More Orchestration Tips. You do not have to go out and buy the book just to get that. I mean, I would hope that you would get it for the other tips rather than that, because like as I said before, this stuff is all available online. So yeah, so just the more natural the glissando, like if you can just rip up to there, you don't have to rip up an entire tenth. You could just rip up a few notes. And I think you'd get there. Like other than this, like the trombonist might have to change the slide position very carefully several times to get this, and probably in the end they'll just sort of completely fake it, right? So this would have to be faked or adjusted or some other kind of thing. I'm sure trombonists out there will probably put it way better than me, but it's not. It won't be a very natural rip, or glissando, not a rip. A rip is something different. That's when you play when you glissando over the harmonic nodes of the overtones. So anyway, but all this stuff aside, I'm just picking it apart left and right because that's my job. But it's not, it's not necessarily my job to say that you're a genius or anything like that. That's what our mums are for, right? But like, but to the extent that you want to know whether or not what you're scoring is workable and everything else, what I would say is that you got some really beautiful colors in here, but like how to improve them, I think that I'm, like how to get more what you're after and to, make sure that players are not wasting their time, or playing things that won't really contribute very much, like say alto flute or this right hand figuration and so on. That could much better be played by say like a glockenspiel or a vibraphone or something like that. Except when it gets really high, gets out of vibraphone range. So yeah, but all that aside, really cool score. I mean, it's really different. Like I'm seeing so many individual voices in these website subscriber evaluations, and it just makes me fills me with so much excitement and hope and enthusiasm. So like once again great great entry, George, and I just really think that like with this kind of freedom of imagination, I just cannot. I can't wait to see what you are going to do with next year's selection and the one after and the one after. I've got it all planned out for the next 3 years, and some real strong possibilities for after that. So anyway, thanks so much. Now let's go on to the next evaluation. I love this, Jerry. It's just got so many different elements to it. I mean, when you think about it, it's only logical to try a bunch of different scoring approaches, and because that gets the most out of me, right? It's the most value, right, for the amount of effort that you put into it. And it looks like you had some very imaginative sessions working out your orchestration. So, with all that said, I'm going to jump in here and say that you did not need to change the time signature here. All you needed was longer durations on your fermata, right? So I think that's something that you might be able to adjust in your notation software. Just like maybe in Sibelius, you can add an invisible change to the tempo. So just make it longer, right? Make it a dotted half note, nice and long, and then just followed by a quarter rest, and then sweeping into this, right? So that you just have 6 bars, and then this right in here. Perhaps something happened when you changed the time signature here, and maybe your notation software jumped 6/4 to the next bar, because this should be 12/8, right? 12/8, it's sort of like writing out a triplet 4/4 time, right? So the conductor would be beating this in 4, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, and right. Where yes, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right. Yes, that is technically it has 12 beats, but the actual beat of the baton is in 4. Right. So the problem is, like, giving it a 6/4 time signature here, the conductor would be beating in 2, right? They would be beating on the strong beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. So you really, since you have nothing in here that implies a cross rhythm or syncopation in 6/4. This is just an error, right? Okay, so just watch out for that. Another thing to proofread. So you didn't need to change this. Just make the fermata longer. Just make everything dotted half note and very long fermata, and then just followed by a quarter rest, and then sweep up, right? All right, so so F sharp here and D sharp. Yeah, so unless you're changing F sharp, right? You have to mark the F sharp. Well, no, you got it in the key signature. All right, so if you're changing from D sharp to D natural, it might be good just to, if you're going to write out all the pitches, to put in a D natural here, just to absolutely make sure that your harpist sees it. And I don't know, that's a lot of upsweeps in a row, right? Is it maybe getting a little old by the time you get to here? I mean, an upsweep is sort of like, it's kind of like a vocabulary word, right? Like, like irrefutable, right? So if you use the word irrefutable all the time, then people start to notice and just kind of start to joke about it, right? So it's the same thing with an upsweep on a harp, right? If you do it too many times, people say, wow, how many upsweeps can you do? Now, you're not really getting into that danger here, but you're sort of starting to, right? So I would say, like, one of them is great, the two is okay, and then this third one is fine because, like, you're sort of connecting, and then the fourth one doesn't really seem to have any, like, there isn't any emotion, right? There's, like, you're not pointing towards an emotion, right? So think about that when you do an upsweep on harp, that you're actually pointing somewhere. It's almost like this arm is sort of reaching out from the music and pointing at something, right? And it's the same thing with this running up. But I'll get to this in a minute, but you just really have to make sure that the upsweep is leading to something, right? It's leading somewhere that, has an impact. Like right here, it's sweeping up, and what happens around this beat is, like, already the left-hand patterns are happening, so there isn't anything connecting with the end of this. All right, so let's talk about your intriguing different combinations here. How workable are they? So I kind of like this. So you got this A3 kind of thing happening. First clarinet, A2 flutes, right? All working together, plus piccolo above. So seeing as how you're sort of spreading out the tone and connecting with the clarinet and everything else, I think that is a very cool way of interpreting the the original material. Now, interestingly, right here, like, you don't need to mark down the horns, right? It all works fine because the registers are staying out of each other's way. Now, if the horn was playing mezzo piano or mezzo forte or whatever, and this were piano, of course it would be shouting it out. But here we don't have that big problem with horns overplaying or outplaying winds, because the winds are so far away. There's a nice spacing here. And this was really cool. This little some things that you added. For the most part, like this contrary motion right in here and other little elements worked pretty well, I thought. And it's sort of like anticipating the middle voice development and so on. It's really nice. So I thought that this worked fine. There's a huge difference in dynamic between your strings here and your English horn. And also between the clarinets and the English horn. So I feel that that's really unnecessary. I think you could have just had, I think you could have had piano crescendo, nothing in the middle, right? And nothing at the end. Just piano crescendo, and then just leave this pianissimo crescendo with no piano in the middle, right? I think that would have been totally enough. I think you get the exact, like with live players, you get exactly the same thing. So keep in mind, like when players play solos, or things that are obviously solos, even if they aren't marked, they tend to play out a little bit, right? So if you're worried about it, I would just mark solo here, and don't worry about it being too submerged, right? This feels, mezzo forte, crescendo to forte and back. It just really feels overcompensating, right? You got nothing to compensate for. Your scoring is really nice here. Just bring it back down to piano crescendo, I would say. Or, mezzo piano crescendo if you're really worried about it. All right. Yeah, and then this right in here, like piano, mezzo piano, crescendo to mezzo forte, diminuendo to piano, to mezzo piano, then piano. Just put piano, crescendo to mezzo forte, and back, right? That's all you need to do. It's just a little over... Yeah, I mean, it's just a little too much detail. So, a lot of times I get after my participants for not adding enough details to the nuance, but here I feel it's a little overdone, right? It's a little too much. So I think just starting here, piano, crescendo to mezzo forte, and I think you could just mark these piano, crescendo to mezzo forte, right? And then back. Yeah, I mean, it's very cool, though. And then, like, the echo right in here with the horns and the bassoons, A2, right? So with A2 bassoons here, horns sort of intersecting with them, I mean, I would rather start my bassoons here, mezzo, piano, crescendo, and back, and then leave the horns at piano. See, I think that would balance, and you don't need to do anything else. You put an accent in the middle here, though, it'll blow this thing away. So, like, try not to get into situations like this where you have brass that are trying to stay out of the way, and then you give them an accent, right? Just leave the accent out unless you really want the brass to stand out, right? They're punching. It's kind of like, I'm going to gently punch you in the face here. Who are you going to punch in the face? Well, these bassoons and the violins above them. Well, I mean, why? What's the purpose of that? Just leave it out, okay? It's fine. All right, and then here, this push forward. Yeah. Yeah, and then kind of the same thing in here. I kind of don't see the need for the mezzo piano marking overall. I mean, I think that the players would just assume that you're going to get warmer, right? You don't have to spell out every single little detail, all right? But this is fine. Mezzo piano diminuendo. Yeah, so will this all balance? Well, my feeling is that it's going to be very brass heavy here. You might not need to put any kind of diminuendo here. You might just as well, I would say, just mark all of your brass piano here, and then let the other instruments cool down, right? And then I would balance the brass out to pianissimo here, right? And then just leave everybody else piano. Yeah, and then right in here, and try not to have like tied, like this is, you're essentially, you basically just copy pasted the tuba part or the double bass part or cello part, I should say, onto the timpani. So here you would just have a quarter note and then a rest and then ba-bum, right? And then don't worry, I mean, the hull will sustain the feeling of the timpani going forward. You don't need to write in the tie to the dotted note or anything like that. Okay, I think that's overkill. All right, so going into this, I already talked a little bit about the sweep. All right, so here is my problem with this. Is like you're sweeping up to mezzo piano as if you were headed for, you're headed for a climactic note, and then you suddenly drop back down. So this is kind of, I mean, it's not impossible to play, Yeah, I mean, I just feel if you're going to sweep up like this with the strings, finish, right? Head somewhere and then end somewhere. I mean, it just sort of feels like something that was added to kind of thicken what the harps are doing, but in the end, like, they're not really contributing to the harp. Like, if you were to have the strings fade out as the harp took over, then I could see the logic behind it, but they're sort of rushing up to something that doesn't connect, right? So I just feel that this, like, falling off the cliff here, it feels a little awkward, especially since you're pushing forwards, right? So, I mean, this is, like, not overdoing the mezzo dynamics is getting a little bit better, but I still feel that a lot of the scoring is really just focusing on mezzo piano crescendo to mezzo forte here, right? And then just really telling us mezzo piano is the middle of the piano dynamic and so on. So just think to yourself, okay, that piano and forte are the two main dynamics, all right? And there's a big world inside both of those main dynamics. It's like a landscape, right? There's a lot you can do. Like taking us up to mezzo piano, taking us down to pianissimo, just constantly really telling us, defining everything really, really clearly sometimes puts some handcuffs on that, and it sort of forces, like there's less nuance. It's just more of a direct jump from here to there, right? So I would just say, see if you can lay off that, right? I mean, what would it hurt, right, if everybody started here piano, including the trumpet, right? Because, I mean, like pushing here to a fortissimo with your first trumpet, wow, that is just going to blow everybody else out of the water. What is going to be audible, really, besides this fortissimo trumpet here? But what if you started at piano and then crescendo forward to mezzo forte here, right? Or let's see, crescendo to mezzo forte by this note, let's say, right? And then everybody else was piano and everybody else had a bit of a crescendo too, right? Then I just think it would work together better, right? Just in terms of like the balance and so on, and the, you know, not giving away too much. Now, just kind of overall, there's some inconsistency with the way that you are slurring things, right? Now, like the strings are a bit better from time to time, but see if you can divide bars more evenly, right? Wouldn't this be better as da, da, right? So down, up, right? Rather than down, up, or down, another down bow, down, up, right? So, I mean, just see if you can divide things in the middle more. I really appreciate that you are not slurring over repeated notes, but what about these repeated notes? Right? You probably have already heard, if you've listened to some of these other evaluations, you've heard me talking a lot about slurring over repeated notes, and what does that mean? Right? I mean, it's not impossible, and it's not even uncommon in a way, but I just feel that people are just dropping the piano type slur without thinking about what the implication is over a repeated note, right? And then here, like you have a marcato accent. You have marcato accents in the middle of a slur, right? So what does that mean? You know, I mean, do you mean them to really push with their gut there? You know, or do you mean this to be kind of legato connected, but then to a punchy note? Or are you even possibly misusing the marcato mark, and maybe what you mean is actually a tenuto mark, right? Just, you know, just to really have a defined, blocky kind of an articulation. Because I'm really not seeing anything in here that where the marcato sign is all that useful, right? And then you just throw one in here, right? But then why is there a slur over it, right? So it's just some inconsistencies here. This is all cool here, right? But you know, once again, like it doesn't really make any sense in the time signature of 12/8, right? So I think just rewrite this, make the runs faster, right? So, and you know, make it start on the 4, right? So, or not on the 4, on the 4th 8th note, right? So rather than da 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 da, I just feel it's a little too slow for what you're trying to achieve there. And of course it's out of time with the time signature. So yeah, so there's some tweaking that you could do right in here. Yeah, and this as well, right? It's kind of no longer working in tandem with the 12/8. All right, and now the thing that really got me started on this whole question of slurs was whether, you know, like whether or not it would be good to slur like these string parts or the trumpet part and so on. There is a disconnect in these otherwise smooth patterns in your first bassoon, right? See this beautiful smooth pattern, and then there's a rest. Then you have this other smooth pattern, and then suddenly a rest, and suddenly a rest. The reason why you have these rests is because you are literally interpreting the lower left-hand staff of the piano part and not connecting the destination of the arpeggio with those middle pitches, right? The middle staff, right? That sort of middle voice, so that there's continuity in it, right? So that might be something that you could work on connecting. I don't really see any need for A2 here in the bassoons. I don't think that will make things smoother. I think it would be better to have octaves with your contrabassoon, but just keep it one bassoon, or stronger. A stronger approach might be to have like second bassoon take the lower pitches and then trade off to first bassoon in the middle of the bar, and then just fill in, like go back and reference the pitches, right? So like the C sharp third, excuse me, C third, and then D third, right? The E right in here could be part of this pattern, and then the D could be part of this pattern, right? So that it's just a flowing, constantly flowing thing, and then you're trading off from first bassoon to second bassoon over and over again, and that way it doesn't wear out the players. Yeah, and then here, so I've seen this in a couple of other evaluations so far, and that is like the perception that bass trombone has this real smooth, flowing kind of a character. But my feeling is that this will, like, it's going to be a lot for the player to learn, and it will also, it's sort of not in the character of the instrument, and it's also like to make this sound incredibly smooth, like a cello would. It's just, you're going to end up, I think that this is a ticket to disappointment. I mean, I think that like you'd end up being disappointed with the result, even if the player really, really worked on it and tried to get this as smooth as possible. I mean, the thing about it is that like you're combining this with bassoon rather than combining it with cello, which would cover a lot of problems, right? The smoothness of the cello would sort of paper over or smooth over a lot of weird defects. But it's the kind of thing where I just, I would like this leap up here, I would kind of give to the tuba. If you really wanted to make this work on the heavy brass, I would say leap up with the tuba to this E, right? And then have on this E trade off so that the bass tuba was going da 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 da, and then have the tuba take over, right? So that might be one way of having it play more smoothly. But still, I just feel that this is really heavy, and it's not going to leave you with a satisfied feeling about how it worked. All right. Now, for all I know, you're a bass trombonist and you're saying, yeah, get it over with, Thomas. I don't agree. All right. Well, fair enough then. But I'm glad that you are more or less keeping a second flute from getting too low. Like right in here, it more or less works because you have like a chorale of 6 voices here, and it's all winds. So that is kind of an exception to a lot of the way too low scoring that I'm seeing in second flute. I just was really hoping that I wouldn't see that this time around, but I still am seeing it. So I'm gonna have to do a video on it. But you haven't made that big problem. So yeah. So I mean, generally speaking, some doubling here in the strings, and I almost wonder if there could have been some doubling here in the winds, like maybe clarinets or some other instrument could have, like maybe English horn and bass clarinet could have covered these pitches to sort of make this a little firmer against the trumpet. All right. But I mean, I love this chorale right in here with the trombones and so on. I mean, it's a cool idea. So great score, Jerry. So if you'll excuse my picking it apart, but think about some of those things, and maybe make a copy of this score and as a second draft, and maybe make a few adjustments and see what you think. Like if the mock-up sounds a little bit better, if it makes more sense to you or whatever. And if like if you don't agree, that's totally cool too. It's just my impressions, and and obviously you're not hiring me to work on your score or anything like that, get it ready for a performance or anything. Watch out for things like this where you have a crescendo under blank staves and things like that. And just, all the player needs to know is that they're coming in on a mezzo forte. All right. Anyways, but yeah, cool score. Really, really loved it. So, wow, we are like halfway through this video. We're going at a really great pace too. I really love it. So let's jump to the next evaluation now with thanks to Jerry. very cool score, Daniel. I'm seeing a lot of nice instincts here and balance and other things. So just to sort of let you know, maybe you could set your staff size larger, right? So you had the landscape size down really nicely, but maybe just make your staff size bigger. There's plenty of room horizontally here, and tons of room vertically. So yeah, just up it a little bit. You've seen some other scores that have about the same density as yours in terms of notes and so on and phrases. So you could definitely go bigger on the staff size, and it would just be easier on me. So now let's jump right into the scoring. A little comment here. You have a lot of pizzicato with harmonics. I'm not sure. Maybe this makes a lot of sense. Just as long as you are aware that this will sound an octave higher, right? Like the harpists prefer that when you indicate the pitch that's played, which sounds an octave higher, rather than the sounding pitch, which just messes everything up when you're working with sound sets that interpret the harp pitch to be it's the pitch played, right? And so it gets a whole generation so far of people who are just aren't specialists at orchestration, but occasionally dip into it, will just assume that that harp harmonics are at the sounding pitch played, right, rather than the difference between the sounding pitch and the pitch played. But let's not dwell on that. The real problem that I'm seeing here is that you are assigning harmonics to pizzicato, and the problem is that is an incredibly soft sound. Now, it is soft even at the soft dynamics that you're indicating, right? So, actually, if you marked it mezzo forte, right, it might be heard alongside these pitches marked piano. But even at that, the harder you pluck on the harmonic note, the more it sort of loses its character of being a harmonic note. So, I would avoid harmonics on my pizzicato unless it was an incredibly delicate chamber orchestra or chamber ensemble kind of playing or solo playing, right? But here you're kind of asking for it, and there you have these more complex, thicker wind textures and so on. It's just going to get swallowed up. So I think it would be better just to score these either as harmonic pitches on harp or just as normal pitches on your instruments here. But as far as that's concerned, just as far as normal pitches are, I think it works fine. Not so sure that this connects quite as well. Yeah, this pizzicato leading to this, trading off to arco. But anyway, let's talk about the scoring. So, octave oboes with the clarinets embedded between the octaves, and that's a very cool sound. Okay, and then here getting thicker, the first flute doubling with first oboe, and that's a very cool sound. Some harmonization right in there with second oboe, and I feel that this works really, really nicely. And then this mezzo staccato on these pitches, and I think that's a really neat idea alongside clarinet, where you have this other things going along here on strings and so on. If you're going to have shorter slurs and shorter durations, then why do we have this big, huge slur, sort of piano-style slur over the first two bars, right? Just to sort of connect it, I guess, but yeah. And this is all doable, but yeah, I would be more tempted to just slur pairs of notes and just kind of giving the player a chance to breathe right in here if they need to. If the conductor is really slowing this down, you're not really giving us a metronome marking, so we don't quite know how slow it's going to go. But yeah, it's still cool. Still cool. All right. Yeah, I think the bassoons are working fine in here. Yeah, it's kind of a nice relationships right in here with the violas and the bassoons kind of entering each other's territory, working around each other. That's really cool. And then right here you get a very, very thick kind of texture with pizzicato bass on the bottom. I think that is kind of nice. I think that you should try to have the same articulation in both your winds and strings, right? So da da, right? So that's tonguing, right? So tongue, tongue. Same thing here. I think you should go down, up. Just make them match, right? Rather than going down, up, down, up, down. Right? I think it just needs to be smoother, and also like you need to give a dynamic. Like I'm assuming that everybody's starting at piano here, so you need to tell the horns to go up to piano, right? But still, all the same, you're kind of holding them back, which is perfectly, it definitely is the thing to do right in here. Yeah, and then you are pulling out voices here so that this is much more delicate going towards the end. And like here is the use of the diminuendo marking in text, and it's perfectly clear where Daniel is headed with the dynamics, right? So this would be an exception to me saying, hey, don't write in the text, use a hairpin. But it's mainly because I was seeing so much of the dropping in of this diminuendo mark without any sense of like where it was going, where the crescendo that was also written in text was headed for, and so on and so forth. But here it's very clear, right? So that would be an exception. Yeah, so you're having one. I guess the first flute is dropping out after half a bar, and then the second flute is continuing on. I would actually do it the other way. Don't worry about the first flute having already been playing for a while, so you want to give them a break. This is absolutely nothing where you need to compensate for between the players of give one a break, let the other one play, and so on. It would be better for the first flute to be marked as a dotted whole note tied to this half note, and this half note be a continuation of the first voice, and then the second voice, like if you really want to take out that middle voice, then have that in second voice, and I would actually have two separate things going on here in terms of the dynamic. I would have the diminuendo mark above, and then I would have like a hairpin below for the second voice, right? To be clear with the with your copyist and so on, and with the player and the conductor. Yeah, but I mean, this is all nice. I mean, I like it. Aside from the pizzicato harmonics, which I don't think are going to work very well, and they're not going to give you what you need here. Okay, and then moving on, right? See, there's plenty of room here for you to expand the staff size of your score. All right, the notes could be way closer together, larger, with larger staves, and spreading across the whole page, and much more readable to everybody out there who can only watch this on a laptop. All right, so just see if you can up the staff size next time. All right. All right, so now we're continuing on with the melody, and once again, there really is kind of no need for I mean, I guess this is all right. It's winds, whatever. It can be long, but just kind of feels to me a little bit like sort of just dropping in the piano style slurring or phrasing. All right, I love this though. This sort of breathy downward glissando, just really nice little touches on harp, right? That's exactly the way to use the harp, rather than replicating the piano figuration. You're just using it for little touches here and there. It feels nicely, just very nicely done, and you're using it in places where it can be heard, right? With before the music gets very intense. Like for instance, here we have a more intense layered scoring, but what do you score there? You score a roll, and you do it before the instruments have reached the forte mark, and you mark it forte. So yeah, really nice use of harp in there, and nice horn scoring. That all works. It's great, and I like the way you're bringing in this warmth right in here. English horn, kind of sort of trading off with clarinet. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is kind of fussy, the way that you got this slurred. I think you could just put a slur mark over everything, and I think it would sound a lot more convincing, right? Like, see, here I've just told you, hey, don't just drop this slur over there if you're not thinking about it. But I think in this case, you could... Yeah, I mean, and here you don't have the slurs match, right? You've sort of taken a sensible option, I think, which is to, have slurs over beam groups. I think that works great, but I think you could just do the same thing for the English horn. Try to have the slurring line up in different parts. I think it just kind of makes it feel more orchestral, right, and less kind of intrigue, like just kind of like a calculation. Yeah, lots of A2 flute, so maybe rethink that a little bit. A2 flute has kind of a breathier kind of a sound. Like the problem is that the flute doesn't necessarily get louder; it gets a little denser, and you have twice as much breath on the note, right? So it's just a possibility that it won't sound as graceful and as limpid or whatever, however you want to describe it, right? So I think that just a single flute here is perfectly fine, right? And there's no need to, so there's a lot of dynamic mixing here. Like you've got cantabile, violas, like it's got the melody here. So do you really want to go down bow, up bow, down bow, up bow, down bow, up bow? Like, shouldn't it be like down, up, down, right? Up, down. And the same thing here, down, up, down. I like the Sol G here in the violins, by the way. It's really nice, kind of trading off with the violas. That's sort of still having that kind of dense, dark sound, right? And then you're trading off with oboes and flutes and everything. I think everybody can be piano here. I don't think you need to mix things like this. I mean, I think you're trying to keep the double reeds in the background so that they don't dominate. They won't, because you've got the spacing really nicely in here, right? So it's like in a passage like this, it's really the horns that need to be pianissimo, right? Because this first horn is going to take over the sound picture so easily that the subtlety of the clarinet above and the wonderful sound of Sol G below in the second violins, you really should mark a 2 here. In the second violins, will be completely lost, right? So here's where I would, once again, like, it's not always the thing to mark down the brass, except for when you have just densely layered stuff like this, where the parts are playing on top of each other. Of course you have to bring back the brass, because otherwise, they overwhelm especially as resonant as they are. That horns have a really strong overtone, an octave higher than their fundamental, right? So that basically just wipes out a lot of other instruments. So here's where I would go to pianissimo, not here. All right, da bum. Yeah, so I think that's all very cool. And then here, see, so you have, I mean, all the winds and brass are working together here, pushing towards this point. I would definitely start at piano with your horns and push towards a mezzo forte, right? And then I think this will balance beautifully. And then diminuendo in all parts. You ended up with this beautifully dark chord. I'm not going to bother going through it. It is a part of what happened before. But, as far as everything goes, like right here, I think that A2 on the flutes would be a nice combination because it is combining with the first violin sound, right? So that's an example of the added breathiness of A2 flutes not, creating less of a problem, right? Right. So with mute. So one last little thing is that this is going to be very snarly, right? So it's all the more reason to bring it down in its dynamic down compared to the other instruments, because that real like in your face, it's not going to be as snarly as stopped horns, right? But it will still have that kind of shallower kind of a sound, kind of edgier, kind of sound like this, right? So so I would bring them back down once again, right? Then I think this would all work really, really well. See, so like they're not, I mean, it feels a little sparse just because things are so stretched out and so on and so forth. But it's just, really nice scoring, Daniel. Just really enjoyable to look at. And, there's a lot about it that really works well, right? So you just need to get some of your proportions and some of your balance down, and I think it will really work great. Here I would go to like, I would have this play out as an octave, right? So octave doubling the oboes here. Right, and then with this still with that note below, and then I think the harp will come out better. All right, well that's all I've got to say about this one, except for thank you so much, Daniel, for participating. And wow, I hope that you and all the other orchestrators in this video are going to participate for the next 3 years, because it's just going to be one thing after another. Having 2 different options next year and orchestrating possibly in a completely different style if you want to. And then a return to this period with a piece by a composer very, very well known for doing things that are completely different. And then finally, just this wonderful panoply of choices for our 10th anniversary. So it would be great to have as many orchestrators on board for that as possible. Not that I want to give myself too much work, but it would just really be great if the 10th anniversary could be nice and big and something special. And I plan to take about 3 months. Hopefully I won't get any like massive commissions right around that time. That would just really, that would be a disaster, or not a total disaster. Don't stop commissioning me if anybody's listening to this, but it would be hard to manage. But I've done other things that were just as challenging, so we'll just see how we go. In fact, I'm actually doing a couple of projects right now, which I think I mentioned earlier in the video. So anyway, with that, let's just keep on rolling, because I'm feeling a lot of momentum on this. So let's go straight to the next evaluation. Very fun score, Yoav. It's just really cool to see it as like almost like a cello concerto or cello solo piece. And you are really pushing your cello quite high here. Yeah. So I would say that if you're going to go all the way up, right up here to this D, then I think that you should probably just score this in treble clef, right? And then possibly jump back to bass clef here, and then go back into tenor clef, maybe towards the end of this bar. So yeah, that might be a better approach there. Now, there are just some general things for you to think about as an orchestrator, okay, and as somebody who is arranging and getting into composing and so on. That is that the your string players, I mean, especially a string soloist, they're going to need some kind of slurs in their parts. I mean, you have almost no slurs anywhere for anybody doing anything, right? So, and perhaps you've left them out just for some guidance from me, and that's perfectly fair. But I really strongly recommend that, looking at the way that the style in which you have scored this, go back and pick up a Tchaikovsky score or a Brahms score, or even just like some earlier composers, say like maybe a Schumann symphony or a Mendelssohn, maybe the Mendelssohn 4, and just really look at the way that those composers score slurs for their string players, right? And that gives the player some idea of how they are going to bow, right? Because you really, you do not want every single note to be separately articulated, separately played, separately bowed. You want some smoothness in here, right? So, and especially like in this, do you really want, up down, 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 like with the bow just furiously going da 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 da, or do you want this da? Do you know what I mean? So I think that you just really need to bone up on that. Just really, and while you're at it, look and see how winds might also be slurred. Like, could you possibly put a slur over this entire bar for both players? Ba, and then da, 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 right? As opposed to dun, 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 dun. So just, really think about adding that. Now, as far as your like dynamics are concerned, I think it's just pretty cool. Like, you have a very, very small sound picture here. Flutes on top of clarinets, and then the solo cello below are sort of inside the part, and harp. So so far the dynamic balance isn't too bad, but then here things get a little bit bigger, bassoons coming in, oboes, and so on. And if you want the dynamics to be consistent across here, then you should probably mark piano here and then have diminuendo with everybody else, right? Just like you did for the bassoons. It's probably just some things that you overlooked. And if the instruments are going to share exactly the same dynamics all the way through, then they can be on the same stem. They can both be in first voice, if you know what I mean, right? Just as if you would be, like you have intervals scored here for your harp, you can do the same thing for your winds, and it's just a lot clearer to read. Like the only need for you to have separate voices really is if they're doing separate things, right? If one player is doing something in a different rhythmic scheme than the other, or playing a different function, right? But since the function of all these parts is pretty much unified, then there's really no need for you to have separate stems for all of the different pitches. I mean, it's really a stylistic things I've actually seen some scores, some professionally published scores that have separate stems in a lot of the parts, but in a lot of, the two flutes, two oboes, and so on parts, but still. So, yeah, so so all that aside, I would say that the problem with this as a cello solo piece is that you really are not giving your cellist enough space in the sound picture, right? So, by the time you come in here with the strings and everything, and you've got the winds on top and so on marked piano, or shouldn't the oboes also be piano, the piano dynamic? So by the time you come in here, you have this rising cello part right in here, and there's the range in which this is in is really covered by other instruments, right? So you not to mention cellos, right? It's the same exact thing. It's the same exact part. So the cellos are going to swallow what the cello is doing, solo cello is doing. Then here, where the two parts sort of diverge, and the solo part continues on above, and the accompaniment part below, this is walking across pitches that are being played in other instruments as well, and that it's not necessarily any louder than the others, nor is it, does it really have, it's louder than the strings here, but it's unclear about what the destination of the dynamics are here in the winds, and certainly they'll be a lot brighter than the cello. So you just really have to, you have to make more space in a situation like this. You really have very mixed dynamics here. So this is another thing you need to work on, Yoav, and that is you need to try to have more unified dynamics and try not to turn different instruments up or down as if they were on a mixing board, because you have to understand that the players don't know what each other are playing, right? So these clarinet players don't know that the bassoonist has forte marked in their part. They might assume, since they're all sort of playing together, that that the bassoons are actually marked pianissimo, and they're just really playing loud, so they have to play a little louder to match them. Do you see the problem? So it's really much better to have the instruments playing, instead of writing such heavily dynamically mixed arrangements, have more unified dynamics and make the arrangement work with the unified dynamics, and then the scoring sounds a lot more realistic, right? As it is now, even with your mock-up, it sounds very angular, and a lot of things don't blend very well, right? And some things kind of don't seem to make sense. Like, why is there a forte here and then piano there suddenly? And they don't really, things don't sort of move together, right? There isn't a unified motion dynamically. Dynamic phrasing, dynamic counterpoint, those are all things that are, they matter as much as just the pure melodic function and harmonic function of parts. And I think that people don't think about them enough. And of course, right in here, the scoring for the strings are places, and this high scoring here for your cellos, really places where slurs would be so useful, right? Slur this, slur the half bar, right? Da, 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 you know what I mean? Da, da. So I think you got a wrong note here. This is supposed to be B, not A. Unless you were sort of changing that in your own mind, you felt that it should be a different pitch on purpose. But yeah. So, just watch out about that. If there's any way you can import my template into your score, then that is a great way of avoiding some of those errors. Okay, but just some general comments. It's not too bad the way that it is scored, but I just think it's very unforgiving to your cellist right in here, and I think that also, there, with the way that you reorganize some of the harmony and so on, it gives the impression that certain harmonies are not the way that they really are in the piano part, right? So that is further reason for caution. All right, now here we're, all the more reason, right? Do you notice how sort of artificial it sounds in your mock-up? Why don't you go to your mock-up and put slurs over everything? Like slur this, slur that, slur this group of notes. Put a slur over each, divide this into half bar slurs, right? So slur half a bar in all of those parts, and then listen to it, right? And then tell me how much smoother you think it sounds. And I would say you could even slur these parts. So you can take different approaches with your slurring between strings and winds. Like the winds can play far more notes under in one breath than a string player can play under one bow, right? Especially when you get into louder, kind of louder scoring. And so, like, in a situation like this, the safest approach for the strings would be to slur every half of a bar, right? So slur the first half, slur the second half, and so on. You might even slur like every beam group, right? And then here you could go, down bow, up bow, down bow. So you're slurring these two notes together, right? And then you can just put one big phrase mark over the harps, right? Because the harp is going to just, it's like a piano, right? They need those kinds of phrase marks. Now, once again, you're dynamically mixing, right? You have piano in all of your parts, but your harp part is getting louder, and then your cello part is getting louder, right? So, and then there are different dynamics here. Mezzo piano, is there any increase of strength in your strings, right? So it's a little, it's a little mixed up. I really do like these, the way that you have developed the middle voice material. That's fantastic. That's really great. Yeah, but still needs a bit of work in terms of balancing things out. Sorry, there's a sort of a kind of a grunty noise in the background. That is somebody. This is a weekend day while I'm doing these evaluations, and so people are out there doing their yard work. All right, now this is very cool. I like the overall effect here of the winds and so on. But like as this starts to get bigger, so we're assuming if we're going crescendo up to, once again we got that high D. I would say anything that has if you have a melodic phrase for the cello and you get up to C or D, up into that area, then really it should be in treble clef, and the cellist can read it just as easily as tenor clef most of the time, just as easy as bass clef most of the time, because you have to think that a lot of cellists started out like maybe studying piano or studying violin, and then as they got bigger and their interests changed and so on, they may have switched. And so it's the same thing for like viola players. Viola players should be able to read treble clef as easily as alto clef, right? Because a lot of them started on violin when they were younger. So yeah, so I like the way that you're working with the functions here, but I still am unsure about the way that you're handling the dynamics and your phrasing right in here. I like this glissando right in here. I like that you put in this pedal mark right in here, this pedal diagram. I think that's very helpful. Yeah, so, but once again, I just feel like there's still not quite enough room here for the cello. Like, if everybody is doing everything together, right? Then, and I know you're trying to leave some space in there, right? But, like, it's still like if you listen to it, you can really kind of, at best, it seems like just another element within the texture rather than having its own soloistic kind of, So I think the trick here with this kind of cello concerto sort of scoring is, I would say really go back to the great cello concertos, go back and, check out the Schumann and the Elgar and so on. Like, really, look at the way that the cello is competing against the other parts. You'll find that a lot of the times when there is a lot of activity, especially in the cello part, that the like winds and upper strings might be sort of dancing around it rather than actually playing along with it. Right? Or when they do play along with it, they really are more background, and they try to stay away from the same range of pitches, right? So like right in here, you've got a lot of, you got a lot of clarinet and oboe and so on, some flute pitches, and like that's all within the same range as the cello here, right? And you've marked up the dynamics, but you can hear, even in the mock-up, right, that it's like dynamically that everything is, it doesn't really matter that it's louder, because in terms of the quality of timbre in the other instruments, they're still swallowing the cello, right? So obviously just mixing things, right, balancing things is not the answer. So that it really has to be more of a holistic approach when dealing with that kind of solo instruments. And let me tell you, I have I've written at least two cello concertos, cello and strings, not rather than cello and full orchestra, but I've also written many solo solo cello passages in orchestral pieces and so on. In fact, I think I'm going to work one into this one piece I'm working on right now, which I think would go over really, really well. So yeah, but just, think about some of those things. Just really give more space to your cello when you have got that kind of stuff. And then I think that then it's like more worth talking about what works and doesn't in the other parts, right? Because it's not like anything doesn't really work. You've got. I think that more motion in the bass would have been nice, like instead rather than just having the harp covering a lot of that. More support. And I think that working with a double bass part, right? Like you just have cellos, right? So you don't have any double bass in there. Double bass could be taking a lot of the pressure off of the cellos and making the cellos easier to play along with the middle strings and stay out of the solo cello's way rather than sort of just duplicating its part, right? But I would say like probably the most problematic part, most problematic page really, or section is really right in here. I think that the lower winds right in here, and just the flow of the string parts right in here just don't do a whole lot of favors to the sense of the cello part being soloistic in here. So think about those things, all right? And I'd love to see you participate in the next challenge because it's going to be so different. It probably will be something that, it would take some real amazing some amazing orchestrational gymnastics to turn the piece that I have planned for next year into a cello concerto. But if you see the opportunity, you're welcome to do that, or just take a completely different approach with it. It might be right up your alley, I'm thinking. Okay, so really great entry. So different from a lot of other things. Maybe throw in some roll marks on these chords in your harp part would be good. So yeah, so really cool score. All right, so on to our next and last score of this really intriguing, really fun, amazing group of scores. Exactly. Yep. That works. That is a great entry. You have really got some orchestration chops already, and it's just so awesome that you can drop in and give me your thoughts on this piece as as an orchestrator who's definitely you've got a lot of craft and you've got a lot of development to your to how you look at things, and yeah, it's just there is a lot that is right with this score. I would say in a situation like this, if you can't superscript the letter O here after the number one, in other words, have it like um, as a small letter above or like at the top of the number, then just write one dot. I think that would probably work a whole lot better. You can I think you can do superscript like by just going command or control 0, right? And then you get like it's sort of almost like a numeral or a like part of a percentage mark or so that's one way of adding a superscript to for the connotation of uno, right, or primo. All right, so yeah, so just kind of looking at the beautiful simplicity that you start here, and hopefully, Link, you have heard some of my other comments about like just maybe not overusing the or not carelessly using the slurring from the piano part, but always just sort of questioning how it works in the context of the piece. Like for instance, here I think you could have put a big slur over the entire harp part just to show the player like it's just one idea, right? And then here, like you could have like if you are having this plucked note here, then why can't we bow this note, articulate on the downbeat for the excuse me, for your horns and your horn and your wind players. Right, so it's just, but you didn't slur over repeated notes, right? And so, yeah, I mean, and then here it's like a little inconsistent, right? So are you going up, down, up, down, up, down, right? Or what? However, or two ups in a row is probably what I would put in if I were the concertmaster. But here you slur up into it, right? So I think it's just better to be consistent throughout, right? And then you also have to think about the whole kind of danger of kind of making your audience a little seasick if you slur across the beat and across the downbeat and the strong beat on a 6/4, right? Da da da, right? As opposed to ta 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 ta. So, anyways, just think about some of those things, okay? Here we've got piccolo and flute really descending down into their lower register against clarinets. Here's an area where, like, and especially like since you're thickening up that same area with violas, it might be a place where you might want to think about the balance right in here. But it's not bad. It's like what you've scored here will work. But there's just, a possible chance of the low first flute and piccolo getting a little, I mean the piccolo not so much, but it's still, it's just a little risky, but it would work. And I love this first bassoon right in here. I think that works great, and the horn, yeah, just really nice scoring. And I especially like this. This is my favorite part here. Da da plink da 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 plunk da da plink da 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 plunk. Right? I think that all works great. It's just beautiful use of the harp as decoration, and just kind of adding a little bit of commentary. And then the harp coming in, the horn coming in here with this. Like I would say, crescendo with this, mezzo piano crescendo and so on. Give us it would be better, I think, to do hairpins here and give us a destination dynamic that you can go diminuendo from. Or even just like hairpin crescendo marks and then a diminuendo hairpin as well. Just like, I think that the boundary needs to be more clear, right? Because like, diminuendo from what? Like, there's no crescendo marked here in the flute, right? It just is way less clearer with the text that's just just dropping the text in from the piano part. I think it really needs to be hairpins, and there needs to be really clear delineation, and there needs to be absolute certainty about what the dynamic is in the middle of the phrase. Okay, that's just my feeling about it. Here, I think you could get this to be way more luxurious with way bigger chords. Just it could even be hand over hand by the time you got to here. Like something that could only be played by three hands, sort of rolled across the harp. And here, this definitely should be two-handed chords, right? Just a really, I think it doesn't have to be too gushy, but I think it would really contribute to the sound picture the way that you've got it scored here. This is all real great in here, though. Combination of oboe and clarinet right in here with the bassoon underneath, and the way this is all working together, and then the beautiful texture that you've got here at the end. That's great. And the first and second horn working together in intervals exactly the way that they should, right? Rather than giving this to the third horn. I just, in the way that it's trading off with the bassoons. It's just so much right about this. I really, really enjoyed it. So now, let's look at the next screen. All right, so I'm just wondering if there's a way of making this flow a little bit more natural, right? Rather than having repeated notes, because it seems to me that the repeats, the repeated notes break up the flow, right? Here you took the C from the C thirds of the middle voice. But couldn't this also be E, right? There's also an E in the middle voice thirds, right? So it's a C third, right? C and E. So what if you had your arpeggio go up to an E and then back to C, and right? There's a way of doing it just so that it really flows across the harp, and it is not really limited to, repeating notes. And then here, if you're starting on the second eighth note, what if the harp and the bass clarinet come in on the third eighth note? So it's rest, boom, harp, and bass clarinet. Rest, boom, do dee dee dee, and that way you don't have to repeat. You can put the low D down here, and then just do cut this note, and then have the bass clarinet come in here, then go up to the E, and then back, right? And then you just avoid any repeated notes whatsoever, right? So, just a thought. Now, this I just really thought was very, very cool. One problem here, I think this should be in treble clef, right? Which you're going up to those B's. It's almost a C. I mean, it could also be easily read in tenor clef. Don't get me wrong. Tenor clef would work great too. Okay, but it just would feel, I think, more natural. If I were scoring this, I would probably put it in treble clef. Well, maybe in tenor clef. Anyways, and then going to bass here. And then just here, this wonderful flowing line here in the cello. Watch out, we've got a misplaced slur right here that is, that should be on the next note head. Yeah, yeah, some very cool stuff in here. This almost feels more like a rolled chord than an arpeggiated chord. Yeah. Yeah, this is a situation where I would have loved to have seen a full length entry from you, Link, because what would you have done next? What would you have done with B and then C and then just such cool ideas. But flute in between, such a great idea. So flute in between violin and cello, and then below that, English horn right in there with the working with the bassoon. So it's just such a fun idea, and it's so simple, right? Now, right here, when you kind of come in with more harmony in your winds and continue on, I almost felt like this was leading to just winds, but then you continued on with the strings. You could have easily just left the strings out and then gone to another color. And this kind of brings up something else in my evaluation criteria, which I'm not referring to as much as I thought I would, but you are definitely progressing the timbre and the emotion as you go, right? And just increasing the scope right in here in a beautiful way. I think that all works really, really great. And I think you could have slurred right in here. Like if this is going to be nice and smooth, then shouldn't this be down, up, down, right? I think that might. So like another thing too is that like keeping these strings in there, it almost makes me feel like you should put like da da. It's somewhere in here, even if it were in other string groups, right? To sort of kind of connect the idea of the strings going forward. But I mean, that's just my instincts. I don't know if that doesn't jibe with you, then don't worry about it, right? And then like the B flat clarinet taking over the da da, and then trading off a bassoon da 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 da, and then horns da 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 da. Yeah, they're really nice. Yep, and there's just nice, serviceable, workable scoring. Now, see the way that you're doing this? Piano crescendo, mezzo piano crescendo to mezzo forte, right? So this is like, that would be preferable than, to just this. Like, we don't really know where it's going or where it came from and how it's coming back, right? So this is a lot clearer. But, I mean, I think you could just do hairpins, right? And then piano crescendo, like, if this is crescendo between here and there, it should either be one long hairpin or it should be poco poco crescendo, right? Because a lot of times, like people will see a crescendo and they'll just crescendo on that bar, right? And if the next bar is really far away, then like they have to think about it and then like they'll get it on the next time through. So just be clearer, right? Just, really kind of poco poco crescendo if it's a crescendo of over one or two bars. Like if it's longer than one or two bars, poco poco crescendo or a hairpin. Just really delineating it out. But, like, other than that, and like this right in here, you naughty person, you should really put your second horn part up here in the top staff, right? But, aside from a few little details like that, it's, I mean, like there's very little that I disagree with in here. Maybe this could be slurred right in here. Maybe you could slur and then tongue on the downbeat, right? Rather than slur into the downbeat. Same thing here, slur, add a slur here, but don't slur into the downbeat. And the same thing here. Well, I mean, here you kind of want that double, do do dee dee. I don't know. It's just, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure if I'm totally convinced by that. But anyways, aside from little, tiny little bits of me picking this out and picking that out, it just kind of makes me wonder, like, oh, what is Link going to do with next year's example, and then the one after that, which is also just completely in a different direction again from either this year or next year or last year, and then like just the wonderful amount of choices that people will be able to make 3 years from now, which I think I'm going to just seriously take off I'm going to try to set things up with like my projects and my, other commitments and commissions and so on, so that like I've got all my ducks in a row and I can just do nothing but all I have to do is just evaluate your scores for like 4 months, which is what that's going to take. Because I know a lot of people are going to jump on board that one. I think that'll be like a record year. Is 2025, which will be our 10th year anniversary. So anyways, thank you all. Thank you, Link. Thank you, George. Thank you, Yoav. Thanks, everybody, for your really great scores. I'm seeing a lot of faces from previous challenges, and seeing how they're growing and developing, and even like people who are already professional and are just doing this for fun, like even they grow, right? They mature as artists and so on. So like everybody's always getting a little bit better. I mean, I feel like I'm a better orchestrator now than I was last year or 10 years ago. So, just seeing the progress and the improvement and the wisdom and so on, like, just get better and better. And then seeing a lot of new faces and so much potential and so much imagination. It's just such a thrill for me. And, that is one thing I'll never get tired of. I might get tired, but I don't get tired of the wonderful opportunity it is to look at your scores. So thanks, everybody, so very much. and I can't wait to dig into the next collection, which I think I'll start on in a couple of days after I've gone through some of the Brev entries. So so much fun. Thanks, you guys. And I will see you in the next compilation of entries from website subscribers to orchestrationonline.com for the 2022 Orchestration Challenge.